From childhood, we're told that modern physics is the peak of human intelligence. Everything is supposedly explained already. Space bends, time flows differently, gravity is geometry. Almost poetic. But there's one small problem. No one has ever seen this geometry of space, touched it, measured it directly, or clearly explained what it actually is. We're told that mass curves space, and that's why objects fall. Fine, but what exactly is curving space, and what is space? That's where things get slippery. You can't see it, you can't register it with an instrument, you can't separate it from equations. You can only calculate it. In other words, we're asked to believe in an abstraction that exists in math, not in direct experiment. Beautiful, sure, convincing, that's debatable. Relativity plays by some very strange rules. At its core are postulates, assumptions taken on faith. Why is the speed of light what it is? Why does simultaneity work this way and not another? Why does mass bend space instead of space acting on mass? The answer is always the same, because the theory says so. That's a closed loop. The theory explains the world using assumptions that can't be directly tested, and any attempt to question those assumptions is treated as ignorance. The theory validates itself, and the conversation ends there. The most convenient part of this system is its built-in defense mechanism. Ask a simple human question, and you're immediately told you just don't understand. It's very complicated. A perfect excuse. If something can't be visualized, can't be directly tested, and can't be explained in plain language, then apparently the problem isn't the theory, it's your brain. That's how physics starts to look less like science and more like a religion with equations. There's a canon. There are sacred names. There's zero tolerance for doubt. Engineers and applied scientists, people who need a mechanism, not a metaphor, are pushed aside. They're not told how something works. They're told to believe that this is just how the universe is. The core problem of modern physics is brutally simple. It took the wrong path. Instead of studying the real, material world, it ran toward abstract, descriptive mathematics and decided that if an equation looks elegant, then the problem is solved. Physics used to ask what was actually happening. Now it explains everything with phrases like curved space, time geometry, and quantum fields. Things no one has ever seen, touched, or measured directly. These aren't physical objects, they're descriptions, useful ones maybe, but disconnected from reality. At some point, a decision was made. Stop looking for mechanisms and just describe outcomes. Objects fall, space is curved, particles interact, there's a field. Why? Doesn't matter, the equation works. And yet, there was another path, simpler, more grounded, and more honest. You could treat the universe as a real material medium, dense, dynamic, turbulent, not emptiness. Not abstraction, a medium where everything is motion, where elementary particles aren't magical points, but stable vortices, toroidal whirlpools in that medium, where fields aren't mystical entities, but forms of matter in motion. This approach at least tries to explain how things work, instead of drawing geometry on paper and calling it understanding. But that path is harder. You can't hide behind equations there. You have to answer questions. And answering questions means collapsing departments, theories, grants, and reputations. If we're being honest, we still don't understand the most basic things. Take two permanent magnets, put them on a table, and they pull toward each other. Why? Magnetic field. Okay, what is it? Where is it? What is it made of? How exactly does it act? No answer, just a word. A neat one. Or radio waves. A signal travels through a vacuum, through nothing, but any wave is a vibration of something. Water, air, a string, anything. Here, emptiness. How does a wave move through nothing? The answer is physical vacuum. So, emptiness that isn't empty. Nothing that behaves like something. That's not an explanation, that's verbal magic. Electricity is the same story. We use it every day. Outlets, lights, the internet. But ask what electricity physically is, and things get vague fast. Charges, fields, potentials. What is a charge? Why does it exist? Why do like charges repel and unlike ones attract? Silence. The math works. The understanding doesn't. At this point, modern physics is pretty honest about its position. We don't need to understand why, as long as we can calculate it. In other words, we don't know what's happening, but we can describe it. That's no longer science about reality. That's cosmic accounting. Instead of admitting we don't understand the mechanism, we're handed a stack of terms: field, space, vacuum, geometry. Ask for a plain explanation, and you're told you're not ready. Very convenient. And if science hadn't turned toward abstract mathematics, but instead kept digging into the real, material nature of the world, then faster-than-light travel wouldn't be considered science fiction today. Because the speed of light is not some ultimate limit of the universe, it's a characteristic speed of a medium. Exactly the same way the speed of sound is not a limit on motion itself. It's just the speed at which waves propagate through the atmosphere. We didn't ban airplanes because the speed of sound exists. We simply learned how to fly faster than it, supersonic, and the world didn't collapse. If there is a medium, it has its own sound. And if there is an ether-like material medium filling space, then the speed of light in that medium looks exactly like the speed of sound in air. A wave limit, not an absolute prohibition. Which means you don't have to break the limit. You change the mode of motion. You don't smash through a wall. You go around it. You don't race head-on. You glide, adapt, reshape how you interact with the medium. The same way an aircraft reshapes airflow around itself. But to think this way, you first have to admit the existence of a medium. And that's exactly what modern physics is afraid of, because the moment a medium enters the picture, things suddenly start to make sense. So-called dark matter stops being invisible ghost particles and becomes properties of the medium itself, its density, structure, and dynamics. Gravitational lensing anomalies stop being mysterious too, because what's being distorted isn't abstract geometry, but the structure of the medium through which light travels. But once you admit that, the beautiful fairy tale about emptiness, pure geometry, and absolute limits falls apart, and then faster-than-light travel stops looking like fantasy and starts looking like an unsolved problem in the aerodynamics of the universe. We're often told that light interference is some kind of quantum magic, that a photon is both a particle and a wave at the same time, that it passes through two slits at once, interferes with itself, and paints a beautiful pattern on a screen. It sounds smart, almost elegant. But if you strip away the hype, it's just diffraction, a wave effect. Nothing supernatural. And this is where things get really interesting, because in the mid-2000s physicists Yves Coulter and Emmanuel Fort ran an experiment that quietly blew a hole in the idea that such behavior must be uniquely quantum. They didn't use photons, not electrons. They used tiny droplets of oil, bouncing on the surface of a vibrating bath of silicone oil. What happened was unexpected. These droplets, completely classical macroscopic objects, began to behave in ways eerily similar to quantum particles. Each droplet generated waves on the surface of the oil, and then interacted with the very waves it created. The result was a self-coupled system, particle plus wave, locked together. When sent toward barriers with slits, the droplets produced diffraction and interference-like patterns. They deviated, curved, and followed preferred trajectories. They behaved as if they were choosing paths. No quantum mysticism, no superposition, no wave function collapse. Just one simple reason: there was a medium. The silicone oil acted as the thing modern physics is deeply uncomfortable talking about. A real, material, dynamic medium capable of carrying waves. The droplet moved. The The surface wave responded, and that wave fed back into the motion of the droplet. A closed feedback loop formed. Wave plus particle. No magic required. This leads to an uncomfortable question. If a macroscopic droplet, moving on a fluid surface, can produce interference-like behavior, purely because a medium exists, why are we told that light, electrons, and photons do the same thing in empty space? Any interference is a wave, and any wave is a vibration of something. Water, air, oil. A material, medium. But when it comes to light, we're told there is no medium, only vacuum. And then, almost immediately, we're told the vacuum isn't really empty. It's physical, full of fields, fluctuations, virtual activity. In other words, there is no medium, but it behaves exactly like one. That's not an explanation. That's a linguistic workaround. The walking droplet experiment points to a simple conclusion that many prefer not to face. Wave behavior appears where there is a medium capable of storing and transmitting oscillations. Remove the medium, and the wave disappears. Leave the medium in place, and even a classical object starts to display behavior we usually label as quantum. Instead of honestly saying, maybe reality contains some kind of material medium we don't yet fully understand, modern physics prefers to say, no medium exists, the universe is just strange, convenient, no need to explain mechanisms, no need to rethink foundations, no need to touch established theories. But the droplet experiment is a loud hint. The problem isn't that the world is weird. The problem is that admitting the existence of a medium would collapse too many beautiful abstractions and force physics back into the hard work of understanding real processes, instead of writing poetry about waves traveling through nothing. It's far more reasonable to assume that something real actually exists. A material medium capable of vibrating, twisting, forming vortices, and transmitting force. Otherwise, we end up with a bizarre universe where waves travel through nothing, forces act without carriers, and space itself becomes an active player. That's a lot of miracles for a hard science. The problem isn't that physics is difficult. The problem is that it increasingly replaces understanding with terminology. And as long as that continues, we'll know how to flip the switch. But we still won't understand what we just turned on. For proponents of quantum theory, one thing can be said clearly. Many quantum phenomena and effects can, in principle, be explained using gas dynamics, as the result of moving vortices within some underlying substance. In other words, they can be interpreted from a materialistic perspective, without invoking mysticism or magical particles. Such an approach allows many quantum effects to be understood, not as fundamentally bizarre features of nature, but as emergent consequences of complex medium dynamics, similar to the behavior of gases and vortex structures. However, a key problem remains unresolved. Gravity does not quantize, and to this day there is no working quantum theory of gravity. This points to a deeper issue. Quantum theory, in its current form, is incomplete. This is precisely what Roger Penrose repeatedly points out, arguing that existing quantum mechanics cannot be the final theory describing physical reality.
I mean, quantum mechanics has made a huge advance on what we knew before. That's absolutely true, no question about it. But there was a trouble with quantum mechanics. It's not a complete theory. I mean, Einstein was of that view too. I mean, it's not just me saying that. Just better people have said that in the past.
Let me be straight with you from the start. What you were taught about gravity at school is wrong. Not a little inaccurate. Fundamentally wrong. In this video, I'm going to explain how gravity actually works, in simple, rough, everyday language. No formulas, no calculations, no invisible fairy particles nobody has ever seen. You don't need a PhD, you just need a normal human brain that still knows how to think. If you watch this to the end, things will actually click. You'll see why the official theory is full of holes, and why everything attracts everything is basically nonsense. If you have a favorite gravity paradox, write it in the comments now. By the end of the video, you'll understand why it falls apart. First question, is space empty or not? For thousands of years people said, space is not empty, there's a medium. Then Einstein came along and said, let's assume space is empty. And everyone went, well, a genius said it, so it must be true. Now let's stop worshipping idols and turn our brains on. We have satellites, rockets, deep space probes. And we talk to them by radio from anywhere on Earth. So here's a simple question. How does a wave travel through nothing? A wave is one thing pushing the next thing. That's it. If there's nothing there, there's nothing to push. But in school they tell you, magnetic field creates electric field. Electric field creates magnetic field. And it all somehow flies through empty space. Hold on. So, magnetic field goes into nothing. Electric field comes out of nothing. Seriously. If a place is empty, nothing can change inside it, because there is nothing there. Conclusion is dead simple. There is a medium, call it whatever you want. I call it ether, and its particles amers. Now, a fact science really hates. The Earth is growing. Continents are drifting apart. If they're drifting apart, something is appearing between them. Simple experiment. Take a globe, cut out the oceans, put the continents together. They form a smaller sphere. That means Earth used to be smaller. Then it cracked. Cracks filled with water. And along those cracks, Earth is still growing. Radiocarbon dating confirms it. Continents are old. Ocean floor is younger. Fault zones are the youngest. So yeah, matter is being created continuously. Now think logically. Where does new matter come from? Meteorites, doesn't add up, sunlight, nonsense. From nothing, impossible. There's only one option left. Ether flows into the Earth and turns into matter. There is literally no other mechanism. How do you turn gas into a particle that lives for billions of years? Ether is a gas. Gas is loose and unstable. So how do you get a proton that lives billions of years? Look at nature. A tornado, gas spins, pressure drops inside. Pressure outside holds the wall. Structure appears. But tornadoes don't last long. Now imagine a ring. Smoke rings live longer, but still fall apart because outside gas leaks inside. Energy dissipates. Here's the trick. Add a second rotation along the ring. Now you get a torus, a closed twisted flow. It holds shape, traps energy, lives a long time. A proton is a bubble of ether twisted into a torus. And here's the key point. Inside the proton, lower density, outside. Ether is much denser. So a proton is like a bubble inside a thick fluid. It doesn't fall apart because external pressure holds it. Every internal particle is balanced. What's happening inside the Earth? Ether flows toward lower pressure. So pressure outside Earth is higher. Pressure at Earth's center is lower. Ether streams move inward, twist, collide. And then, boom, protons appear, atoms form, solid matter grows. Like foam, volume increases fast. Everything gets pushed outward. That's why Earth grows. And this is where it gets stupidly simple. We are made of protons, atoms, crystal structures. And the proton is a bubble in a pressure gradient. What happens to a bubble in a pressure gradient? It gets pushed toward lower pressure. That's just Archimedes' force, but in ether. Gravity is not attraction. Gravity is pressure pushing you down. In simple terms, the force depends on how big the pressure difference is and how much volume the object has. That's it. No magic. What follows from this? We do not attract each other. An apple doesn't attract another apple. Only planets and stars create gravity. Gravity is not infinite. No pressure gradient. No force. No distant stars are going to rip us apart. They looked for ether wind in the wrong place. Ether doesn't blow. It slowly flows inward. Objects change size. The farther from Earth, the higher ether pressure. Protons compress, dimensions change. Now you have a real model, not a fairy tale. You can break any gravity paradox, understand alternative propulsion, and yeah, theoretically build things that make physicists nervous. But knowledge comes with responsibility. If we don't grow mentally as a society, we'll destroy ourselves. That's why this channel is not just about physics, but about logic, society, and how not to kill ourselves with technology. Forget everything you've been fed about inertia and weight. It is not just a simplification. It is a fundamental lie. Right now, I'm going to show you that weight is a phantom, and inertia is the behavior of the medium inside an object. No formulas, no dark matter, no invisible ghost particles. You don't need a degree, you just need a head that hasn't yet forgotten how to think for itself. If you watch to the end, something will click. You'll see the holes in the textbooks and understand why mass is not what you think it is. First trick question, what is weight? They tell you, it is the force of Earth's attraction. Lie. Picture an object. A crystal lattice, atoms, protons. Now stop. Do they weigh anything by themselves? No, they are the lightest dust. Weight is created by what surrounds them, the medium, the ether. It is dense, it is heavy, and it is everywhere. Inside the lattice, outside, in every crack. And this ether presses. The pressure is higher above, lower below. That pressure difference, that is your weight. It is not attraction. It is being pushed down. Archimedes, only the world is turned upside down. The conclusion is lethally simple. The weight of an object is not a property of the object. It is the force of the ether's pressure on its volume. More protons, more volume, more pressure. That is it. But what about mass? It is measured through inertia. You push an object, you feel resistance. They say mass and weight are proportional. Yes, that is, via the coefficient 9.81. And here is the catch. If weight depends on the number of protons, then inertia must depend on them too. And that is logical. More protons, a larger structure, more emptiness inside it. Both parameters grow together. That is your proportionality, no mysticism. Let's say we push this piece of matter. You'd think the heavy ether inside should lag, and the light lattice should move forward. But that doesn't happen. Know why? Because the air outside can't instantly fly inside and knock the ether out. A low pressure zone is created at the boundary, and the ether inside the object is forced to move along with the lattice to fill the void. They are inseparable. With a normal push, you can't feel where the inertia of the iron ends, and the inertia of the ether inside it begins. They are one. To separate the substance and the medium inside, you have to spin it. Centrifugal force, that is your knife. It will force the dense ether inside to redistribute, to be pushed to the edges. Now the crystal lattice and the ether flow inside are two different entities. This is the key to all the strange effects. Take a massive disc, flywheel, on a rod. The rod can tilt freely. Spin the disc. Observe three things that would give a theoretical physicist a meltdown. It lifts itself. The faster it spins, the more it wants to stand vertically, by itself. It turns itself, precession. Let it go. The axis starts walking in a circle. Asymmetry. Try to rotate the rod yourself. In one direction, the disc easily soars up. In the other, it forcefully pulls down. Now ask your physics teacher, why? He'll start talking about gyroscopic moment and Coriolis. The gyroscopic effect is about resisting a change in axis. Here, the axis changes by itself, the exact opposite. Coriolis force, that is an vanishingly weak force that only works in one plane, due to Earth's rotation. Our effects are powerful and in all directions. This isn't Coriolis, this is something else. So, why does the gyroscope lift off? While the disk isn't spinning, ether presses on every proton inside from above. That is the weight. You spin it, the internal structure starts working like a vein pump. It churns the ether inside. The ether, which is now rushing around in circles, no longer cares about the static pressure from above. The spinning disk loses weight, the first nail in the coffin of the official theory. Centrifugal force drives the ether to the rim. It flows out through the ends. To replenish, it is sucked in through the sides, a circulation. And here is the main trick. Due to the difference in external pressure, higher above, ether is easier to suck into the top part of the disk and harder to eject from it. At the bottom, it is the opposite. Result, the pressure above the disk drops, below it increases. That difference pushes the entire disk up. The faster you spin, the stronger the push. That is it. No magic. Because of this redistribution, the center of mass of the system, disk and ether inside, shifts. Rotation around the shifted center, that is your precession, that walking of the axis. The Chinese top that always stands on its stem and continues spinning in the same direction after flipping over. That is because a stable ether vortex has already formed inside it, which spins the matter. That is not the inertia of the substance. It is the inertia of the medium inside it. The Johnny Beckhoff effect, when a nut tumbles in weightlessness, the official explanation is a tangle of formulas from the tennis racket theorem. In reality, either a weak ether pressure gradient flips it, or a disruption of the spin axis warps the internal ether vortex, and it tumbles. Again, the model of the ether inside works. Why you can't weigh the weight loss on regular scales? You'd think if a spinning disk gets lighter, put it on a scale and catch the difference. Won't work, because the disk getting lighter pushes the ether down, and that ether presses on the scale pan itself. One thing gets lighter, the other gets heavier. The needle stays at zero. The effect is masked. You need to get clever. Separate the source of the effect and the measured object. Suspend a weight above a fast spinning disk. The spin will create a zone of ether rarefaction under the weight, and its weight on the scales will decrease. That will be a clean, irrefutable measurement. What follows from all this? Conclusions that piss everyone off. Inertia is not a sacred property of matter. It is, first and foremost, a property of the ether trapped inside that matter. An object resists a change in speed because you need to redistribute its internal medium. Weight and gravity are not attraction. It is the pressure of the external medium, ether on the object's volume. All these effects, gyroscope, top, Johnny Beckhoff, are real and repeatable. Official physics doesn't give them a clear, elegant explanation. The ether model does, simply and consistently. Gravity and inertia can be controlled by creating the right flows and pressure differences of ether inside and around an object. This is no longer fantasy, it is engineering. The very principle that unexplained engines could work on. Now you don't have a fairy tale about the curvature of emptiness, but a mechanical, tangible model. A model you can trust because it explains real, not imaginary paradoxes. This knowledge is a tool. With it, you can understand what official science denies. If society doesn't grow morally, we'll just find new ways to self-destruct. That is why this channel isn't just about physics. It is about how to think so, as not to break the world while trying to understand it. Subscribe if you want to dig deeper. Thanks for watching.